Snow had started falling before sunrise, turning the quiet street into a soft white blanket. The world looked peaceful, almost magical, the kind of morning people imagined when they thought about Christmas. But inside the small, aging house at the end of the street, the magic of Christmas felt very far away. Adrian Cole sat at the kitchen table, staring at a crumpled piece of paper in his hands. The house was silent except for the ticking of a cheap wall clock and the distant hum of cars passing outside. His coffee had long gone cold, but he hadn't noticed. His eyes were fixed on the childish handwriting written across the page, a Christmas wish list. It wasn't a long list. In fact, it had only one line. And that single sentence felt heavier than anything Adrian had ever carried in his life. Before we continue this emotional journey, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Touch of Kindness. If you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, this is the place for you. Adrian rubbed his tired face with both hands. At 34, he looked much older than he really was. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and worry had carved faint lines across his forehead. Life had not given him much time to breathe over the past few years. 3 years earlier, Adrian had been living what he believed was a normal life. A stable job, a small but comfortable home, and a family he loved more than anything. But everything changed one rainy evening when a phone call shattered the world he had built. His wife never made it home that night. The accident had been sudden, cruel, and final. One moment she was driving back from work, the next moment she was gone. Just like that. And Adrian was left alone to raise their 5-year-old son, Rowan. The first year after the accident had been the hardest. Adrian had no idea how to be both mother and father. Every morning felt like climbing a mountain. There were lunches to pack, clothes to wash, tears to wipe, and bills that never seemed to stop arriving. Money became a constant shadow hanging over their lives. Adrian had taken 2 jobs just to keep the house. During the day he worked at a hardware store. At night he cleaned offices downtown. Sleep became something rare, something he only managed in short, restless bursts. But none of that was the hardest part. The hardest part was watching Rowan slowly understand that his mother wasn't coming back. Children have a quiet way of processing grief. Rowan didn't cry loudly. He didn't throw tantrums or scream. Instead, he became quieter. Thoughtful. Sometimes Adrian would catch him staring at old photos, his small fingers tracing the smiling face of the woman who used to tuck him into bed. This Christmas was supposed to be different. At least, that was what Adrian had hoped. The town had already begun decorating weeks earlier. Lights hung across rooftops, inflatable snowmen appeared on lawns, and carols drifted through grocery store speakers. Everywhere Adrian went, people were talking about gifts and family dinners. But for Adrian, Christmas had become another reminder of what they had lost. He simply didn't have the money to celebrate the way Rowan deserved. That was why the piece of paper in his hand felt so heavy. It was Rowan's Christmas wish list. And there was only one thing written on it. Not toys. Not video games. Not even candy. Just 6 small words written in careful, uneven handwriting. I want Dad to be happy again. Adrian swallowed hard. His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped invisible chains around his heart. He had spent so much time worrying about surviving, about paying bills and keeping the lights on, that he hadn't realized his son had been watching him slowly fade. Across the street lived a woman named Clara Whitmore. Clara had moved into the neighborhood almost a year earlier. She was in her early 40s, kind-eyed, and known for always greeting neighbors with warm smiles. She worked as a school librarian and seemed to have an endless supply of patience and kindness. She had noticed Adrian long before they officially met. Noticed the way he left for work before sunrise. Noticed the way Rowan sometimes sat alone on the front steps waiting for him. And noticed the quiet sadness that seemed to follow them both. One bright afternoon, a few days before Christmas, Clara saw Rowan building a tiny snowman near the sidewalk while Adrian shoveled the driveway. She walked over with a gentle smile. After chatting with Rowan about his snowman masterpiece, Clara turned to Adrian and asked a simple question. "What's your Christmas wish this year?" Adrian paused. At first, he tried to laugh it off, brushing snow from his gloves. But the question lingered in the cold air between them. He thought about money. About sleep. About all the things he had been wishing for quietly. But none of those were the real answer. What finally came out of his mouth was something he hadn't even planned to say. His voice was low, almost embarrassed. "I just wish my son didn't have to grow up watching me struggle." Clara's smile faded slightly. She saw something in his eyes then, something deeper than exhaustion. A father who felt like he was failing even while giving everything he had. That answer stayed with her long after she walked back home. That evening, Clara sat by her window looking out at the quiet street glowing with Christmas lights. She kept thinking about Adrian and Rowan. About the little boy's gentle smile. About the weight Adrian carried alone. And suddenly, she knew she couldn't just watch anymore. The next few days were filled with quiet planning. Clara spoke with neighbors. She visited local shops. She made phone calls and knocked on doors. At first, people were hesitant. But when she told them Adrian's story, something remarkable began to happen. The baker offered fresh bread and pastries. The toy store owner donated gifts. A local mechanic fixed Adrian's aging car for free. Even the hardware store manager quietly arranged a Christmas bonus Adrian never expected. Piece by piece, the neighborhood began coming together. But Clara had one final idea. On Christmas Eve morning, Adrian returned home from his night shift, exhausted and ready to collapse into bed. Instead, he stopped in the driveway. His breath caught. The entire street was standing outside his house. Neighbors. Families. Children. And in the center of it all stood Rowan, holding Clara's hand. For a moment Adrian couldn't understand what he was seeing. Then someone switched on a string of lights wrapped around his front porch. And another neighbor carried out boxes filled with gifts. Clara stepped forward, her eyes shining with quiet emotion. She explained everything, how the neighborhood had come together after hearing his story. How people wanted Rowan to have a Christmas full of joy. And how Adrian didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. Adrian stood there speechless. His hands trembled slightly as he looked around at the faces of people who barely knew him but had chosen kindness anyway. Rowan ran forward and wrapped his small arms around his father's waist. For the first time in years, Adrian felt something shift inside his chest. The heaviness that had lived there for so long began to crack. Tears filled his eyes, but this time they weren't only from pain. They were from relief. From gratitude. From the realization that sometimes, even in the darkest seasons of life, people can bring light back when you least expect it. If this story is touching your heart so far, please take a moment to like, comment, and share the video. Your support helps spread more stories of kindness to people who may need hope today. That evening, Adrian finally sat on the living room floor with Rowan surrounded by wrapping paper, laughter, and the warmth of something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. But before we reach the end of this story, I have a small request. Please comment the word kindness below if you believe a single act of compassion can change someone's entire life. Because sometimes, it truly can. Later that night, after Rowan had fallen asleep beside the Christmas tree, Adrian stepped outside. Snowflakes drifted quietly through the night sky. Across the street, Clara was standing on her porch. Their eyes met, and Adrian gave a grateful nod.